Ahead and get started. So good morning, and we're going to talk today about the FAFSA Submission Summary, or what you may also know it as the Student Aid Report. My name is Megan Crum, and I'm one of the Professional Development Specialists here with the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. And so just a few things before we get started. Know that we are recording today's session. It will be posted on our website as well as our YouTube page. If you're having any trouble hearing me at any point, you can have WebEx call you at the number that you prefer for your audio. The Q&A feature is located at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, so the team that is on today would be happy to answer any questions that you have. I have a lot of screenshots in the presentation, but know that if you have any questions as well, on the screenshots you can ask the team. You can view any of our upcoming webinars at the ISAC on our ISAC page. We just announced our April ones as well as we'll have a few more in May as we wrap up our year. And then the continuing education credits and professional development hours are available for the webinar. We'll talk about that at the end. So if you're just new to this work or you don't know who we are, so we'll talk a little bit about ISAC. So we are the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, and we provide Illinois students with information and assistance to help make education beyond high school accessible and affordable. And we do that in a couple different ways. One is that we administer one of the largest state grant programs in the country, and we administer what is known as the Monetary Award Program, or the MAP grant. That is a need-based grant to students, but we do also provide a ton of professional development for high school counselors, as well as just college access professionals in general, on navigating just the federal financial aid process as well as state financial aid. And this is one way we do that as well, to share about what's happening right now in these updates with the FAFSA. So what I'm going to talk about today is just what will happen before students receives their FAFSA submission summary. So that's the confirmation and the processing, and then what the submission summary will now look like. And so for students once their FAFSA has processed. So let's talk about what's going to happen once a student submits their FAFSA and it's completed. At this point, they'll receive this page. So this is the screenshot that you see on your screen is from the parent side saying, yep, everything's been completed. This is the completion date, and this is what you'll need to be doing next. So this is something that hopefully parents have seen as well as students. But this also will be emailed to them as well, that they will receive a confirmation email. But this is what is found on the FAFSA once they hit submit. They can track the status of their FAFSA, and I'm going to talk about the status tracker here in a little bit, but this is just an example of what they would see. A student will receive a confirmation email from Federal Student Aid. This is the example of what it will look like. So it will come from Federal Student Aid. It will tell them their submission date. It will tell them their date release. That should say data. It says date release number, or the DRN. That number can be used to identify the student with the institutions that they've sent their FAFSA information to. So say for some reason a student makes multiple corrections, they're going to get that DRN each time they resubmit a FAFSA. At that point, the student can tell the colleges that number, and the colleges can look it up by that number. Additionally, the email will also tell them an estimated SAI or a student aid index, and that number that you see there. If you're not aware that the student aid index has had some calculation adjustments recently, one due to inflation, but also there was an error in the form for some dependent students whose FAFSAs were processed before March 21st. What's going to happen is that the department has to update those FAFSAs again for those certain dependent students who need to report asset information. So the SAI that the student got in their confirmation email, say if they did it like this person all the way back in January, is not going to be correct. Okay, that's super important to remember. That confirmation email is not going to reflect the correct SAI. The processed FAFSA should, especially after the 21st of March, will show the correct SAI for that student. So as I mentioned, there is going to be a status tracker that a student can always track the status of their FAFSA, meaning where it's at in the process of the processing cycle. So this is a screenshot of that example of what it will look like. So this is a person's whose FAFSA has completely processed. So it will tell the student, okay, when was their FAFSA form started? And so in this case as well, it tells them, okay, great, we have all this information. It was started on this date, it was submitted on this date, and then it does tell them the student when it was processed. So this student's FAFSA was processed on March 15th. And then the form was processed. It says, great, congratulations, it's been successfully processed. This status tracker will show up on the student's My Activity page. So the student, once they log in to studentaid.gov, or they just simply go back to fafsa.gov and log in with their FSA ID, the first thing that will pop up, right, is the dashboard. They will navigate to the My Activity page, and they will be able to see this status tracker. So this is from the Department of Education. They shared this on Facebook, actually, of what are the different kind of things that a student will see as they look at their status tracker. So one would be the draft. So if a student started their FAFSA but has not yet fully completed it, it will show up as a draft. In progress, meaning that the form is currently being worked on. This would show both on the student and the parent side. So once a student invites their parent to the form, it will show in progress, okay? But it's important to know, if it says in progress, the form has not yet been submitted, okay? So I know when I was helping some students at workshops in January and through February, it was that, the student had just submitted their portion, but on the parent side, it still said showing in progress. Once the parent submits, right, then the system has to kind of play catch up for just, a minute or so, and it will eventually change to in review. Now, you may still have many students that are, in this process of their FAFSA tracker still says in review, which is very common right now. So eventually we'll get to this process piece, right? This one that's got the green check mark, but it will go from in progress to in review at that point. Okay, once it's been fully submitted. If there's a case in which a student was unable to submit everything for their FAFSA, so say they're missing a signature, maybe they didn't provide consent like they were supposed to, or their parent didn't. This case, this yellow box would show up that the system has identified the student or the parent. There is an action required by them, and it tells them that either you're missing consent and approval or a signature, or just a correction in general is required by the student or parent. Eventually, as I mentioned, the student will get to this processed one with the green check mark, meaning that the form has completely processed and that it is good to go. The information will have been sent to the colleges that they listed on their FAFSA, and it will get sent over, but there's no other action that the student needs to take unless for some reason they need to add in another school that they want, or if they do need to make a correction, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But once it shows that it's processed, the student has no other action items unless they need to do something. And then it will show this closed option that in the case that, say, a form was started, so they went into draft mode, but they never finished the form, and say it's past the deadline of when to submit a FAFSA for that academic year, which right now it will be some time, but it will show closed. And so hopefully no one right now is showing closed. If you have a student that is, please let us know. They should eventually be seeing one of these other 5 options, and hopefully the processed one soon. So with these processing updates, so as of just earlier this week, the department has shared that they have processed over 4 million FAFSAs. There is a backlog of 6 million. So they're working through them, and this is still that students are still completing FAFSAs as of today. And so that backlog is growing, but they are processing them. Now, with this is that the students will receive an email once their FAFSA has processed, okay? But so this is gonna come later, like this, one of the screenshots that we have is from a real person. They did not get an email, okay, of they're saying their FAFSA was processed. They had to log in to see that it was processed, okay? They had not gotten an email yet. So if your student has not gotten an email yet that it's been processed, I would encourage them to log into their account and check on their status of their FAFSA to see if it has been processed. Because at that point, they know that if it's good, or if there's it's saying action required, they will have something to do, right? But if a student can always log in to check their status, and it will show up on that status tracker. So that's everything before a student receives their submission summary, right? Some of those key terminologies. But now we're going to talk about the submission summary itself. So what is it? It is formerly known as the Student Aid Report. The Department of Education has renamed it to the FAFSA Submission Summary. There is no acronym for it, unlike the Student Aid Report, which used to be known as the SAR. It's just called the FAFSA Submission Summary. And so this is a document that explains all of the has all of the information that the student and parent or parent reported on the FAFSA. But it's also going to tell that student what is their eligibility for federal financial aid. Okay. It is important to note that this is not a financial aid offer or award letter. You may know them as, we call them aid offers, and so does the department. The submission summary is just telling the student that the form has completely processed and the information has been shared to those colleges. It is not a financial aid offer in its entirety at all. And so, but it will tell them their eligibility for a Pell Grant, federal work study, as well as federal student loans. It will tell the student also their SAI. Again, there were some calculation errors. So the email that a student got, say, all the way back in January, is not going to potentially match, I imagine, with what they will get now once their FAFSA is processed. Okay, so that SAI could go up, it could go down, but know that it's going to change. So a student will receive an email letting them know that the FAFSA has processed, but of course they can always log into their studentaid.gov account to view the actual summary. And that's what I'm going to show you now. So once a student logs in, okay, you saw the screenshot about the tracker. The tracker will show everything at that point. This button is actually at the bottom of where it says, yes, your FAFSA has processed. So what's going to happen is that this blue button that you see on your screen will show for a student once their FAFSA has processed, okay? And so they will be able to view their submission summary. That's going to be on their My Activity page where that tracker is again. So they just need to log in, navigate to that page, to the My Activity page, and that's where they have to scroll a little bit, but this is where they'll see it. Then once they click on that button, they're going to see this immediate screen first. They're going to see the eligibility overview. Okay, there's 4 tabs to a submission summary now. So if you remember of what either a paper submission summary looks like or a SAR, it's a bunch of lines and text kind of things and boxes, and the one online was kind of this really long document, right? Now the department has broken it up into 4 different tabs, and so the eligibility overview is going to be first. Okay, it's going to tell the student what that student is eligible for from the FAFSA. So in this case for this student, so this is based on an independent student. Okay, now this is an independent student who is not who has a bachelor's degree. So unfortunately we haven't been able to get a dependent student, but this case is still what it would look like, right? So if a student's eligible for a Pell Grant, it would show up here on this screenshot, right? It also would tell the student if they're eligible for any direct loans. It also would potentially tell them, right, if they're eligible for federal work study, okay? The one thing in here is that this green box here at the bottom is that it's the keep in mind. You always want to make sure, like, yes, these are estimated, values in this case for like federal work study, a Pell Grant, right? The final determination will be on a student's financial aid offer once they receive that from their schools. So there are 4 tabs, as I mentioned. There's the eligibility overview is going to be the first one they see. Then there's the FAFSA form answers, school information, and the next steps. Now on here, this is a screenshot of the top half of that page. On the bottom half of the eligibility overview, it's going to say a student can view their SAI. And this is the box that you see where it says, what does this mean? That your student aid index is going to tell them what their SAI is. And for this student, it's $9,919. Okay. Now, this is the same student that we used their screenshot from previously from that confirmation email. The confirmation email said 12,000, right? This now says 9. Okay, so there was that change between the SAIs. If a student does click on what does this mean, this box that you see with the sliding bar opens up and it tells the student a little more in detail of how what is the SAI mean and that definition of that it's a sliding scale. But again, students necessarily don't have to click on what does this mean, but they will see that the box here, I know it's kind of light green, but where it says your student aid index, that's what they'll see at the bottom of their eligibility overview. From there, a student could navigate to the FAFSA form answers. So this is going to show all of the answers that the students submitted on their FAFSA, including their parent information, okay? And so this is what I'm going to point out as well. This is where our student will see this make a correction box, okay? Right now, it is currently grayed out, okay? Students cannot make any corrections until April. That is super important to know. I know that's so late, but we are in a waiting game with the department for this process, but this is where they will see make a correction. Okay, so they have to navigate to the FAFSA form answers, okay, option of that submission summary, and then to make a correction, okay. From there, what's going to happen is a student could navigate to the school information page, but I want to talk about the corrections delay. So as I mentioned, that they're going to be able to start making corrections in April, hopefully by mid-April. Okay, the department has been pushing some things, but hopefully by mid-April. But again, this is why I really encourage your students to get logged into their accounts to see if their form has processed, or if it does say some sort of action required, no, because that tells them that they need to make a correction. And once the corrections functionality becomes available, they can do that right away, right? Well, a student can only make a correction though once their form has processed, right? That has to take place first in order for a correction to take place. So say you have a student submit a FAFSA, April 15th, and the correction process is available, say by April 8th, hypothetically. The student has to submit their FAFSA and then have it processed, right, before they can submit a correction. Okay, so the processing part has to happen first. Right now, a student, if they log in, they're going to see this message that says, hey, check back soon for correction. So it says, we expect that the online corrections will be available in the coming weeks. Excuse me. In the meantime, check your FAFSA submission summary to review your responses and see your eligibility information. So this is something that they're going to see right at the top of their My Activity. Once they click into the submission summary as well, they're going to see, okay, yep, this is for the 24-25 FAFSA. It has been processed, but this is the message that they'll see about the correction information. As I mentioned, a student could navigate to the school information. So this is newer in this case, that it used to be when you saw a confirmation page, it was there, a student could scroll down. This is where a student can just view some other information about that school. So for this student, they sent their information to Eastern Illinois, or EIU. And so a student, to help make them an informed decision, right, they can look at what is their graduation rate, what's the retention rate for that school of of freshman to sophomore year, what is the median debt upon completion. I think that's as students talk about their financial options, a big one. And then what is just the average annual cost for a student at that institution, right? So they will see if they submitted more than one school, right? So if they have multiple schools listed, they're going to be able to compare to say, okay, this school says this for their graduation rate, this school says this for their, their average cost, right? But again, a student should wait to see, really to compare, those final things once they've gotten their financial aid offer. From there, a student can navigate to the next steps portion. And so this is just letting them know that the student may have things to do. Not every student will have to do these things, okay? Especially because once a student's form has processed, if they're good to go, they're good to go. They don't have to make a correction unless they need to, but they could navigate to this next step portion. And that first one that they'll see is correct any errors on your FAFSA form. A student can select the drop down arrow, and then what's going to happen is they'll see this messaging as saying, hey, this is what it means to make a correction, right? The student will also see, make sure your schools have everything they need, look out for aid-related communications from your school, right? So they can look at it. Again, it's something that they may have to do. Not every student will in terms of the corrections process, but things just to be aware for them as well as they kind of wrap up their year and what to be expecting from their schools as well, okay? So that is the submission summary as a whole. We only had 30 minutes today, but it's a quick overview of what students can be expected to be seeing. One thing that we have done here at ISAC is build out a a communication toolkit. So you can access this for free. It's a bunch of different things in there on flyers, as well as scripts for like robocalls, draft emails, kind of thing. So especially as if you want to send out a big email to your students to saying, okay, yes, the correction process is available, to, send it, hey, go in and check to see, if you need to make a corrections kind of thing to get that started, or whatever you may need. But yes, we have a communication toolkit for you all. Additionally, we do have the Financial Aid Application Completion Initiative. We did a webinar back on Tuesday, but I want to touch base again because for the school counselors here on the call now, you do have access to see your class rosters. Okay, you are able for public high schools. Okay, so for private high schools, you do have to upload your rosters, which that functionality is available now. But for public high schools, your class rosters are populated. Okay, you can go in there and edit the information. So you can add and delete students. Okay, you can also go in and check out if you have students who completed a paper waiver for the graduation requirement, you can go in and check those boxes for those students, and then make sure to press save changes. Additionally, we will announce when the data matching goes through. So that's the last piece that we're waiting for to be released for functionality, is that data matching, because we are getting the FAFSA data from the department and we're starting to match data. But we'll announce that once the functionality is available. But you can go into Gap Access now and edit your class rosters. Okay, so I encourage all of you, if you haven't got a chance to get logged into Gap Access for this year, to do so. Additionally, we do have our upcoming Illinois PACE Symposium. This is one's going to be held on April 16th. The other one's going to be held on May 8th. That QR code, if you scan it, will take you to the registration page. You can navigate also just to ISAC's page for PACE. And so we're excited to be in Champaign as well as in Elgin. And we're going to hear from a variety of schools and partners on how they're implementing PACE. Additionally, we do have an upcoming PACE half-day training. One's going to be at the University of St. Francis on April 11th, and the other one's going to be at the Shawnee Community College on April 18th. And this training is free. The PACE Symposium is $25 to attend. For the half-day training, again, if you scan the QR code, it will take you to the registration page. This is specific to implementation for PACE. So what we have supports, but also examples of what other schools are doing for their implementation for their PACE framework. We do have a first generation scholars network that your students could join. So your first gen students, this is just to support them with their transition as they finish up high school and into college, and they make that transition, so they can connect with someone if they have questions, those kind of things. I'm a first gen student, and so I wish I'd had someone just to kind of ask of like, what does all these words mean, and all the stuff I have to do, so they can join the network for free to get support in that area, in those areas. Okay, everyone's favorite part is the CE and PD hours. So if you are needing to request CE and or PD hours, you do have to submit an evaluation by 4:30 on Monday. So even if you don't need CE or PD hours, we do ask that you complete an evaluation. If there's anything that you want us else to present on, we're happy to do that. But if you do need CE or PD hours, you have to submit that evaluation that was posted in the chat, which is located on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You have to do that by Monday at 4:30 p.m. So thank you so much. We're a little bit ahead of schedule here. I'm a fast talker. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at isac.outreachtraining@illinois.gov. Again, as I mentioned, we will release the full functionality of GAP. We'll make that a message about that. We'll send it via our ISAC's e-messaging. So if it's our version of a listserv. So if you have not signed up, I encourage you to sign up. We don't spam you, I promise. We just release the big information. So any upcoming webinars, those kind of things. So thank you so much and have a great rest of your Thursday.